Welcome to malcolmpresents.com with Courtney on Health with Courtney Grevenese. Do I have that right?
Yep.
And
Finally.
and Maxine. Maxine.
It's okay. Maxine's enough. It's all right.
I always forget. But anyway, take us into the show, Max.
I will, because that's what I do. So hi, Courtney. Hi, Malcolm, and welcome to Courtney on Health, the Zoomcast podcast series about how to get through. I don't know what to say anymore. I think, Courtney, we have to figure this out because it's still COVID and I don't know what to say.
Yeah, but it's how to get through life.
How to get through life by eating right and exercising, with tips on nutrition and exercise given by Courtney Grevenese, registered dietitian with a Master of Science degree in nutrition and applied physiology, which she explained in the last episode. So I'll tune into that. Courtney is an experienced nutritional and health consultant in the New York metro area and into the universe, and will help guide you on a path to wellness and health. So a little in for the show today. We love peanuts in the baseball park when we watch a game, and peanuts, Reese's Pieces. Oh man, I'm a fan. And then Charlie Brown and Snoopy, different peanuts, and of course PB&J sandwiches, but many times they don't love us back and can cause allergies. Courtney will connect the dots to certain foods that cause allergies and why they have become more prevalent. So Courtney, can you start us off about allergies and what we need to know?
Absolutely. So thank you. I hope everybody's doing well and feeling well. So if I were a little bit more on my game, and I apologize for not being, May is actually Allergy Awareness Month, Asthma and Allergy Awareness Month. So we're a little bit behind. It would have been a little bit more timely to do this last month, but nonetheless, super important to talk about allergies. I thought I would give a little bit of background, certainly the prevalence. I hear a lot from my clients and from people, and when I get questions, either Instagram or on Facebook, or like, what gives, what's with the rise in allergies? And there certainly has been an increase in prevalence over the years. So we'll talk about that, but let's separate out, first of all, food allergies from food intolerances. Today, we're going to talk specifically about food allergies. And those are quite literally anything that's considered an adverse health effect that would arise from a specific immune response. And typically in the cases of allergies, we're talking about something called immunoglobulin E. It's an antibody. So IgE is probably what most people are going to, be more familiar with. So this makes it a little bit different than somebody who might not, let's just say it's gluten, for example, and they just feel better if they remove gluten from their diet. These are different, and we'll talk about the reactions that these IgE mediated reactions could be in a second or two. So do you guys happen to know what the top 9 allergens are? Food allergens we're talking about right now.
Nuts would be pretty up there, I think. Some people are allergic to milk or, the lactose, right? And
well, the lactose is actually the one of the intolerances. So that's
right, lactose intolerant, right?
Right. So, but you're right. The milk protein allergy is one of the top 9. So peanuts, tree nuts. So peanuts, legume, tree nuts, think things like cashews, think Brazil nuts, think walnuts, separate categories. And I think that's an important distinction to make, because although it is sometimes the case where somebody will be allergic to both peanuts and tree nuts, they can be separate, and somebody can be allergic to peanuts, for example, but be totally fine with tree nuts. So that's why the diagnosis is important. And again, we'll loop back with that. So our tree nuts are milk allergy, peanuts, soy, eggs, fish, shellfish, again, 2 separate categories. And most recently, sesame. Oh, and I forgot about wheat. So sesame is now built in. It used to be the top 8. Now we're including sesame because of the prevalence of sesame allergies that are being seen not just in the United States, but in other industrialized countries as well. So these 9 allergens account for 90% of the reactions, that the allergies, the responses that are seen. So that's important because these aren't the only food allergens out there, but they do account for most of the issues. Most of the people who have allergies have one of these 9. Did you have a question, Malcolm?
Yeah, the one that I have is if I'll eat shrimp that's not well done, my throat gets like, it's sort of like puffed up. It's sort of I have trouble swallowing.
Okay.
I don't know whether that's common or not.
Well, one of the common reactions that is seen in people who do have food allergies would be that tingling in the throat, restricted breathing, some wheezing, swelling of the throat, neck, face.
Swelling of the throat.
So definitely. Now, this is why diagnosis is important, and let's talk about that for a second. I'm a dietitian, you guys know that. I know my world. Dietitians are not. We might speculate and guess based on our clients' symptoms and what they're experiencing that they may have a food allergy, but dietitians can't make a diagnosis. You need to see a medical doctor in order to make that diagnosis. And there's a couple of different ways that are commonly used. One is the skin prick, which if it sounds exactly like what it is, like you'll get scraped on the surface of your skin, the various different allergens to see how you will respond to it. And the other one is a blood test. The gold standard would really be a double-blind, placebo-controlled food tolerance test to see how you respond to it. But the fact of the matter is that's very expensive, it's very time consuming, and it's just not practical in sort of common medical practices. So the default would be these, the blood tests and the skin prick. The problem with those 2 tests is that although it's what we have and what we're using, they tend to be somewhat unreliable. And what I mean by that is 50 to 60% of these tests result in something called a false positive result, meaning that you will test positive to a certain allergen, let's just say soy, and there's a pretty good chance that you actually won't have a true allergic reaction to it. But still, it's the best of what we have. Most allergist specialists will work with that information on that blood test and combine it with family history to see, is there a genetic component here possibly? Take a look at environmental factors and literally talk to the client, talk to the patient and say, oh, what kind of symptoms are you having after you consume this food? And putting all that together will lead to the best workable diagnosis so that you can appropriately follow dietary guidelines to avoid any of the reactions.
So, Courtney, I have one word question. Why? And then I'll add another bit. Over the last few decades, all this has increased. And I mean, when I was a kid, I don't remember the kids having peanut allergies. Everyone would be eating peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. There was no issues. It seems that it's something that has taken on, you mentioned environmental factors. Like what's the why in all this now?
Well, I think that's the $1 million question. And I think there is not one absolute answer. So I'm going to give you what's believed in the communities, like what's causing all this. First of all, it's important to realize that there are more food allergy diagnoses in industrialized countries, meaning that when you look at places like perhaps Africa or parts of Asia, their rates of food allergies are very, very low. So what is it that's going on there? And one of the things that's going on there could be something called sort of a hygiene theory. I'm not sure if either one of you have heard of that before. And that is, our immune response. So if you think about it, our bodies are, with allergies, with food allergies, we're being exposed to, we come in contact with the protein from one of these foods that we mentioned, or perhaps another one that's less common. in a normal situation, our bodies are going to look at that and be like, it's just a protein, leave it alone. It's supposed to be here, right? The problem is something's not working quite right. And your body is looking at that as something harmful. Meanwhile, the protein is completely harmless. So it causes our bodies to overproduce these, IgA antibodies. So what is it about industrialized countries that's causing that? So maybe and there's a variety of different things. Maybe we are, we don't have the microbes that we should be having. So there's this hygiene theory. Maybe we've over sanitized everything to the point, our food supply or everything. And again, this is not an argument to go out, not bathe, not clean yourself, and not get immunized. That's not what this is. But it's perhaps in these environments where the body is so busy, working so hard to knock off and get rid of really bad diseases, that it doesn't have the time. It's too busy to deal with the protein from a food, as opposed to maybe us. It's like, you know what? I'm really lazy. I'm a little bored right now. And I hate to bring it down to something like a kid's cartoon, but it's kind of really what one of the theories is. It's like, it's got nothing else to do. So it's going to go after something that it considers harmful. So that's one reason.
Excuse me, there's a old comics joke about that, about how, when we were raised, we played in the dirt.
Mm-hmm.
And we couldn't almost eat dirt. If something fell on the floor, we just brushed it off and you ate it. We would drink water from the hose in the garden.
Right.
Yeah,
And,
we
and,
did
and
too.
in today's world, everything is antiseptic, and so
Right.
our body does not build up an immune system to that, or antibodies for that particular.
George Carlin said that that he and his friends would go jump into the East River, and none of them would get sick.
Dose.
Right. So they get all whatever's floating around. They never got sick. But the kids whose parents say, don't go to the river.
I swam in Coney Island in the 50s, and you swam in Brighton Beach. And each year at the beginning of the summer, there was reports, don't go in the water, it's polluted. And what they did those days with the garbage dumps, they took the boat and they went out 5, 6, how many miles to dump the garbage. But when the tide changed, the garbage would come back to the shore. And I don't want to tell you the things that we used to swim in.
Don't ask.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you.
We're not suggesting that everybody go swim in disgusting, like, bacteria, microbe-filled water. That's a big difference from, taking a look at your gut microbiome. We hear this all the time. What's on our skin microbiome? There's so much to this. So that's why it's not sort of a short answer, Maxine. There's a lot to this. The way how we're eating, the fact that we don't get enough, remember vitamin D, and we've spoken about this in these sessions before.
Right.
Vitamin D is so important for our immune function. And we know that certainly in the United States, but it's becoming more of a worldwide issue. Our vitamin D levels are not where they should be. So perhaps is it because our vitamin D level isn't high enough, and that's contributing to the problem. Pollution. Listen, the reality is we're in people's environment. When you look at asthma, for example, we know that children in environments where there are mouse droppings, cockroaches, bad environments, the environment around them, they are at greater risk of asthma. Are you around smoke, pollutants? All of these things may be contributing to it. Do they have absolutely a role in developing food allergies? Don't know for sure yet, but it's certainly something that the research is following to see if there is something specific about it that could lead to somebody's food allergies. So, and then the last thing, and this is important to mention, better diagnosis. Right. Remember, if you're looking for something a little bit more, you're going to find it a little bit more. So, so that's definitely part of the mix. It doesn't explain all of it, but it's definitely something to consider.
I saw somewhere that taking away the allergen is what they do. But now they're saying maybe they shouldn't take away the allergen. Maybe they should introduce it slowly and see what it does. Is that something that they're doing right now?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, because if you looked at recommendations from, let's say, 15 years ago to even 10 years ago in terms of, and let's take two categories. There are pregnant women, and then women, like what to feed your infant, after they're born. So figures 0 through like 3. So there was a time not too long ago that the advice to pregnant women was to avoid, for this theory that if you get exposed, if the infant, the baby's exposed to this in utero, you're putting them at greater risk for these allergies later on. So we were telling pregnant women, myself included, avoid nuts, avoid, tree nuts, no dairy, try to limit your cheese, try to keep soy, watch shellfish. I mean, the list was endless. And then up until recently, it was recommended that parents wait until the child was 3 years old before introducing, in particular, nuts. Now, obviously, you're not going to give, because the choking hazard, you're not going to give a 2-year-old nuts in any form, in a nut form, because it's a choking hazard. But we've really sort of taken a look back and say, this is probably not the best advice, because the research is showing us that that was not necessarily helpful. And in many cases, particularly for pregnant women, you're clipping off a lot of foods that they would normally be eating that are very nutritious. So now it's actually, again, and these are in babies who do, and individuals who do not have allergies. So if you've been diagnosed with an allergy, or your child is 2 and been diagnosed, this is a separate category, but they're actually encouraging things like, introduction of soy, introduction of egg, introduction of things like nut-based products. They obviously not a whole nut choking hazard, but they make things called these nut puffs now that have the protein in it, but it's like it breaks away. So it's like a food that you could give to an 18-month-old because it dissolves away and it's not a choking hazard, but it's slowly exposing them to that protein to build up over time. So we've definitely changed the recommendations, and it seems to be particularly helpful. Now, what's important is that if you have a child or you are an adult who does have an allergy, there are certain allergies that are we tend to outgrow by the age of 3 and 5. Milk is one of them, eggs, soy, wheat. Most people will outgrow those in childhood. The other ones, not so much. So if you do still have those allergies, there are programs, and again, you'd want to work with a qualified allergist that really work with you on these very, they titrate small amounts of exposure to the allergen over time in a very controlled environment to see how you respond to it. So don't be surprised or think like, what are you talking about? I should never have this particular food. Generally, yes, you want to avoid the allergens that will cause a reaction in you, but do know that this is where some of the treatments are moving, particularly in things like if you still have cow's milk allergy or any animal, so it could even be buffalo, goat milk, slow exposure to it. There's really recent information about baked egg and baked milk products being particularly helpful in people who still have either egg or milk allergy or both. So they're showing that, let's say, for example, baked breads and muffins with egg or milk in it actually are helpful in the reintroduction of these foods. So it's very different than what it was, even 10 years ago.
Right.
Than what it is right now.
Is there a psychological type of allergy, like if you think you're allergic to this, that if you eat it, you will have the symptoms? I mean, all of a sudden the mind will, produce the symptoms?
Although I tend to never underestimate the power of what the mind can do over the body, because like I said, these are very clear, these are IgE mediated responses, and even some of the non-IgE mediated responses, these are very obvious signs of a reaction. So I would never want to put that, I would never want to sort of blanketly say that that's, that would be typical. So is it possible? I suppose anything is possible, but these individuals are absolutely having a response. And for people who do have allergies, it's very important. It's like an asthma management plan. I'm always amazed when I see relatively young kids, and by the time they're teenagers, they get it. They know how to ask in restaurants now. They know what to ask for. They've clearly got an EpiPen. They know their plan. So it's really part of the whole plan that an individual needs to have if they've been diagnosed with this allergy, so that they're prepared.
What about gluten? I mean, this is the thing of the last few years. Is that an allergy? Is that a tolerance? I know. Is it celiac? What's the thing that goes with it? But I mean, it's a huge industry, because now everything you look at, the bread is gluten free, and this is, what's that, the aspect of it?
Right. So gluten habit and celiac sprue, that's the disease, it's considered a non-IgE mediated response. So it's a type of allergy, but it's an autoimmune response. Your body just cannot digest any form of gluten. And although the response might not be as immediate as, say, a nut allergy, because normally if you have like a nut, you're going to feel a response pretty quickly after that, typically. People with celiac disease absolutely will feel that and just cannot tolerate it. And it puts them at great risk if they do have it. There's a difference between somebody with celiac sprue and somebody who just intolerant, I don't want to say just intolerant, that sort of diminishes the, how people might feel, who has an intolerance to gluten, and they feel better if they just remove gluten from their diet. That is fine, but that is not the same category as somebody with true celiac. They can choose those. If they have a little bit of gluten, they're probably not going to be as symptomatic as somebody who's got celiac.
Wow.
If you have a child that has, these symptoms, is there something that you should carry with you, that in case they eat the nuts or whatever and they break out or have the symptoms, that you could give them that might be life-saving?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is something that both the allergist, and if you have a child that's been diagnosed with an allergy and you're working with the dietitian, they will of course reinforce as well. There is, like I said, a plan, and part of that plan is to make sure that there is not only an EpiPen at home, but there's one in the nurse's office at school. There's one with the camp counselors. It always needs to be with the child. So in some cases, there actually needs to be sort of an IEP in place in schools, or so that that accommodation is being met, so that that child always has access to it. Keep in mind that small little children might not have the ability to administer the epinephrine on their own. They will need an adult to help them with it. So, again, it's important to make that part of the plan. As children get older, they're able to own that process a little bit more, and they can carry it with them. And like I said, the clients I know with allergies really get it. And then, of course, I've got the friends of my children who have been in my home, and they absolutely get it too. But now that I'm mentioning that, as a parent, as a friend, as a family member, we can be, if you've got kids in your home, I always ask if it's a new friend of my kids that's in my house and I'm feeding them, if it's a younger kid, I ask the parent, any food allergies I need to know about? Because the house like mine, you guys hear me talk, I'm talking about, I got nuts flying all over here all the time. So I mean, including myself, but
I was going to say something, but I didn't.
yes, the number one nut. So I want to be aware. It's just the right thing to do. I'm not asking that you completely revamp things, but you would want to know if somebody's in your home and they could be at risk. So ask those questions. In some cases, parents are much more comfortable not having their child eat in another home, and then that's fine, but know that information. And then in some cases, the allergies are not that severe. The person still carries an EpiPen with them, but they're able to liberalize their diet a bit more because they can have a food, let's say, for example, that's been made in a plant. It doesn't have nuts in it, but it might be manufactured in a plant or a facility that does have nuts in it. Some people can't go near those products. Others can. So just have the conversation, do the right thing and speak with people. But, I would want that if it were one of my kids in somebody else's home. So it's an easy thing just to ask to find out for safety.
Definitely.
Yeah, I have in my notes that you wanted to touch on quickly, I guess now, a preliminary study that says decreased COVID incidence in people with food allergies.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's
what
crazy.
Is that?
Yeah.
I was like shaking my head. I'm like, what is this?
I know. So it came out earlier this month, and the study was started early in COVID, so 2020. And what it is, again, it's very preliminary, and I don't really know what to do with this information yet, except that it is intriguing and interesting to me. So they were following, so they have a group of people who did not have asthma or food allergies, and they were following the group of people who did have asthma or food allergies. And what they were showing was that the individuals with asthma and food allergies, for whatever reason, it might be a receptor cell situation, but for whatever reason, they were at decreased risk of developing COVID.
Wow.
Crazy. So again, they're working, their study is still ongoing. They're combing through the data. They really don't have, aside from this receptor cell theory, that could be one of the reasons why it's beneficial, but it's actually opposite of what, including myself, what you would have thought that would have happened. You would have thought that they were at greater risk.
I would think it's greater risk because of the immune system.
Well, there's a lot of doctors still say that asthma, COPD, if you get COVID, it's going to cause lung issues because it hits your lung. And then this study, I don't know who it's by, but it's just completely counter to what we think is logical, right?
Absolutely. And again, it's very early. And of course, as with many research studies, these need to be replicated. And it's not there yet. So, but interesting nonetheless.
Excuse me, I know we're talking about food allergies, but how about sort of like allergies like bee stings or hay fever? Is that a similar type of reaction in the body, and do you do similar things to medicate that?
Yeah. So as is the case with food allergies, that histamine response from that tripping of the IgE, absolutely. So in many ways, I think I'm so grateful that my kids were stung by bees early on, and then it was sort of okay, good, they're fine with it. But it is a similar type response. So sometimes it's just a welt, right, or a hive type response. Sometimes you get the redness without the welt. In really severe cases, it can be that closing of the throat and that swelling. And as the case with bees, unless you're stung by one, you don't really know. So, you don't walk. First of all, you can't get EpiPens, on your own. It needs to be through a prescription. But I do I have it for myself, and this was just recommended to me for being a parent, whether it's a reaction from a food or from a bee sting or from a bug bite. Keeping something like an antihistamine, like a Benadryl around your home is not a bad idea, unless there's some reason why your physician has told you or to not take it or not give it to your kids. Definitely not a bad idea. I'm not saying that prevents you from, you should keep you from getting to the emergency room, but it's a good thing to have on hand for those situations. But some people suffer terribly from seasonal allergies. We're just coming out of a wicked pollen season this spring. My kids don't have it. In the fall, it's more hay, so the allergies to hay. So, you kind of have to figure out and work with it. But I think it's important, as in many cases, to, know yourself, know what's going on with your kids, and be as prepared as you possibly can for these types of responses.
Wow. That's pretty crazy.
Now we're talking about the kids and that they might outgrow these allergies. Are there allergies or things as we get older that we're more susceptible to, that senior citizens, like again, as I grow older, I became more lactose intolerant because when I was a teenager, after I came back from running or playing ball, I'd drink a quart of milk and it was fine. Now I'll drink a glass of milk and my stomach is upset for the whole night.
Interesting. So I didn't mention this last week when you brought this up, Malcolm, but I was thinking about this because, again, my brain's constantly thinking about this stuff. Milk happens to be a great source of electrolytes. So part of my brain was saying after we got off our calls, like, you know what, this was his body's way of saying I need electrolytes after my workout. So that's that issue. But the intolerance to milk, again, separate from allergy, those are two separate responses that your body is having. It is absolutely well known that we, as we get older, become a little bit more lactose intolerant. So what I would normally encourage with my client base is watch the volume of how much you're having. You might be fine with, let's just say, a half a cup to 3/4 of a cup of dairy product and that amount of lactose. But once you push it above that, say to, a cup and a half or 2 cups or whatever it is, it's past the threshold of what your body can tolerate. So sometimes it's very much dose dependent. So that would be but we lose the ability to break down lactose, that milk sugar, over time.
Guys, I hate to tell you this because I think I have a lot more questions for you that may not answer, but our time is up.
Our time is up.
But thank you for being so informative.
Yeah,
you're welcome. My pleasure.
Great information, and hopefully it will get it out and people understand a little more. And that's fat. That's
Okay,
good.
Max, do your exit.
Do my exit. So thanks for joining us. My exit.
What would we do without you? It's amazing.
I don't know. The intro and the exit. I don't know. That's me.
The show would go on for hours.
At least 4 hours. So thanks for joining us for Courtney on Health. To get more info, follow Courtney on her Facebook page, Courtney on Health, on Instagram at CLG Wellness. Visit her website, CourtneyGravenese.com. For more shows, go to MalcolmPresents.com and theManyShadesOfGreen.com. This is Courtney on Health, smart, sound nutrition, strong, safe fitness, and we'll catch you again next time.
See you next week.
Have a great week, everybody.
Have a nice week.
And just a reminder, all of Courtney's back shows, you go to MalcolmPresents.com and you can see all the shows since we started. If you have any questions, contact me at malcolmpresents@gmail.com. Have a great week, guys, and thanks again.
Bye.
Bye.